Welcome to Focus Today. I'm your host, Perry Atkinson, and it's been too long, but I am always delighted when we have time to sit down with Frank Gaffney. Frank is a special guest we have here, and he's the host of Securing America TV. He's also the Real America's Voice and Vice Chair for the Committee on the Present Danger, China, which defends Americans through public education and advocacy dangers posted by the People's Republic of China. Frank is the host of Secure Freedom Radio and the founder and president and CEO of Save the Persecuted Christians. So he's very busy. His website is securingamerica.tv. And there's a picture of the landing page, securingamerica.tv. Brother Frank, good to see you, friend. How are you?
I couldn't be better, especially since I'm with you, Perry. Nice to see you again.
You're so kind. Thank you. Thank you. Well, listen, before we get into all these other things, what's your 30,000-foot view of the scrimmage in the White House on Friday?
I'm of the view that it was deeply regrettable, for one thing. And, you know, unfortunately, it was, if you actually watched the entirety of the press availability, the last 10 minutes were so discordant. They were, you know, obviously the case. Both the president and J.D. Vance were trying to be welcoming and I think supportive of their visitor, President Zelensky of Ukraine. And he was on his best behavior, too, it seemed. And then, you know, the whole thing jumped the rails. I hope not permanently. My own feeling about it, Perry, is that the kind of arrangement that Trump was working towards of a deal that would involve the United States becoming actively involved in mining operations and presumably other economic activity in Ukraine is a sensible way to try to establish both that there is, you know, some financial compensation, if you will, for what the Biden administration sluiced into Ukraine, on the one hand, and also some engagement on an ongoing basis that will provide a deterrent to Putin thinking that he can simply pick up where he left off at his convenience, if there is, in fact, some sort of ceasefire or even a peace agreement.
It's I agree with you. I always tell people, at least during the morning show here, watch the full 50 minutes. You'll get a better feel of the last 10. It went off the rail. And then all of a sudden you look at the Secretary of the Treasury said that he knew going in that Zelensky going into the Oval Office wasn't going to go for the mineral deal. And I guess I'm trying to scratch my head. If there was anything on the table that could become the avenue to bring the parties together to start talking, the mineral deal would have been it. And I wonder why he turned it down.
Well, honestly, there's a lot of psychoanalysis going on here, and the Treasury Secretary probably has a better fix on a lot of it than I do. But I just am not altogether clear that he did turn it down, so much as in the heat of the moment, he created conditions under which the president was not about to sign that day, and have a lunch for him, and then do a joint press conference with him, and so on. That was obviously a bridge too far. But my sense is it is in the interest of both countries, and that they will revert to it. At least I certainly hope they will.
Yeah. In the meantime, back to your specialty here in so many areas. The president has called for Europe allies to move their spending from 2% to 5% with NATO. I guess over the weekend, because of the spat in the Oval Office, a bunch of them came together over the weekend in Europe and met together on how to maybe salvage the deal. And am I hearing it correctly that they're now thinking, well, maybe we should increase our spending to NATO? Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, I think you are. It's a little unclear whether it'll be spending to NATO or whether it'll just be defense spending, which, assuming NATO persists, and I think it will, would then help both meet their present obligations to a 2% of gross domestic product and and get it north of that. Not quite as far as Britain is looking for, but considerably more. And ironically, the focus on all of that at the moment is a function of the SEP tube, or more generally, shall we say, some of the comments that were made by Vice President Vance in Munich and at NATO 2 weeks ago, I guess it is now. And sort of the general thrust of President Trump's policies towards Europe at the moment, they're suddenly seized with an insecure.
Okay, we're having a little bit of problem here. Let me do this. We'll take a quick break and we'll reconnect with Frank. While we're doing that, let me say that his website is securingamerica.tv. There's a picture of the landing page. We'll take a quick break now, and we'll try to get that cleared up, and we'll be right back. Okay, welcome back, and we got all the technical things hopefully corrected. Always an honor to have with us Frank Gaffney's back with us, the host of Securing America TV, and he's also the host of Secure Freedom Radio, and he's the founder and the president and CEO of Save the Persecuted Christians. So Frank's a busy guy. His website is securingamerica.tv, and there's a picture of his landing page. Sorry about that, Frank. Hopefully we got that worked out. I want to come back to...
Perry, I just have to say, I heard Microsoft is pulling the plug on Skype. I was afraid they were doing it today.
It's interesting you'd say that. The buzz in our own engineering department this morning is Microsoft fooling around with Skype. Give me a break.
Yeah.
We'll look at that.
Just another big tech attack on our people.
Well, you know what it is. What do they say? You buy your competitor and then you eliminate them.
Yeah. Well, this is the Chinese model.
There you go. Yeah. All right. So I want to come back to what's happening in Europe, whether or not they increase their NATO expenditures from 2% to 5%. The bottom line is what President Trump has brought to light is that basically America has been paying for Europe's defense. And I think he's a little tired of that. And if we were to pull out of NATO, that would be horrific. And if we were able to negotiate something with Russia to get out of Ukraine, that leaves America pretty much the powerhouse. I don't know if that is all realistic, but am I misreading this?
Well, I don't think that it's in prospect at the moment that Russia's going to get out of Ukraine. Very much as I'd like to see that. They seized part of the Donbass and then Crimea a decade ago, 11 years, I guess now, and they're not going to relinquish those areas. And they've now conquered a lot of other territory in Ukraine, and I think they will probably expect to hold on to all of that too. The question really is that going to be the extent of it? If there's a ceasefire, or better yet, a peace agreement that recognizes that is, unfortunately, the reality of the situation. Will that feed Putin's territorial ambitions for conquests elsewhere, or will he say, okay, Donald Trump is in office now, I'm not going to, engage in further acts of aggression? I don't know, and it's one of the things that I think is that was, really very much animating Zelensky in that White House conference. He said, with feeling, and I think entitled to be rather emotional about it, we've seen a lot of deals with Putin, and he has not honored them, especially when he thinks he can get away with worse behavior. So whatever, I did a commentary this morning, Perry, and I said it's a lot easier to reach pauses in a conflict than it is to resolve the conflict. Mm-hmm. There's a practice, and you want to talk about the Middle East, this is top of mind for me, of what's known as hudna perfect example for the Islamic faith. He engaged in a ceasefire, if you will, at a time with a tribe that he was at war with when he was losing the war. He used the pause to regroup, to rearm, and then to resume the hostilities at a time of his choosing, to the great, detriment of that other tribe, by the way. Mm-hmm. And that's now, the tradition under which many in the what I call Sharia supremacist camp engage in. We're seeing it in the Middle East at the moment, and I think there's reason for Ukraine to be concerned that might be the upshot this were to happen now.
So, Frank, the president's obviously taking a lot of heat for what happened Friday in the Oval Office, and his people that don't like him saying that he's in Putin's camp and that he's doing nothing but delivering the talking points of the Kremlin, and the list goes on and on and on. I guess the question is, what do we do with Putin now?
What I believe Donald Trump very much is intent on doing is not just getting him to stop the war in Ukraine, but to switch sides, to essentially abandon the so-called no-limits partnership that Putin struck with Xi Jinping, the dictator of communist China, back in February of 2023. In fact, interestingly enough, right before Putin went into Ukraine, in the most recent episode, the war there now. I personally believe, Perry, that was that no limits partnership was in part the green lighting by Xi of that invasion. A green lighting, by the way, that preceded in what I call the acts of strategic arson in which Xi has engaged, the invasion of Israel by Iran's proxies, Hamas and Hezbollah, and the attacks by Iran itself. So all of these are things that I think are operating in the background, and I think Trump very much would like to see, not necessarily because he trusts Putin or he thinks Putin is going to be anything other than what he is, which is a ruthless thug, but that he might be aligned against China rather than with it against us. That's a strategic goal that I think has some distinct appeal. I don't think it's very likely, to be honest, but that I think is operating for the president at the moment.
To that point, I've read some articles where, to underscore what you just said, might be one of the strategies that's on the president's mind, because the only thing that Putin gets out of China is really a fuel contract, so to speak, where the United States could not only provide other resources for Russia in the way of trade. So I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. But in the meantime, Putin is sitting over there probably smiling with this whole mess at the moment. Do you think Zelensky in the long term survives? And the reason I ask that, his greatest ally in the Senate turned on him. That's Lindsey Graham. I mean, he went from being a flag-waving supporter to saying he needs to go.
I don't know. It's obviously a matter for internal Ukrainian politics, and those have been pretty muddy for a while now. He's past his term in office. They're saying you can't have elections during a war, and there's something to that, of course, though other countries have done so. In this case, my own personal assessment is that Zelensky has such a checkered record, notably with respect to corruption, that it seems to me the people of Ukraine would be well served by his standing down to be replaced by perhaps one of the prominent generals who has emerged as an alternative to him. But I don't know that that's in the cards. I don't think the fact that Lindsey Graham has turned on him is dispositive. The question is, have the people of Ukraine turned on him, and will they act through, presumably, their elected representatives to do something about it?
The other question I want to swing your attention to, Frank, because you're kind of a hawk on this. With all this going on, how do you see China these days?
Well, some have actually said I'm a super hawk, which I prefer to being just a plain vanilla hawk. But look, I don't mean to make light of this. I personally believe the Chinese Communist Party, led by Xi Jinping, is determined to destroy this country. And it's not just my inference or my speculation. That's what they say. And they say it all the time in English in their propaganda outlets. They've actually declared war on us going back to May 2019. And before that, for decades, they didn't declare it. They just did it, a sort of unrestricted warfare, as we call it. We have a wonderful coalition we call the Committee on the Present Danger of China. Perry, as I think you know, we do a weekly webinar. We've done about 200 of them, I think, to date. They are sort of a crash course on what the Chinese Communist Party is up to and the various lines of attack. You can't even sample that output without coming away with the distinct understanding that whatever we think of China, whatever we want with respect to China, what they want is the end of the United States as an impediment to what they believe, the Chinese Communist Party believes, is its rightful place in the world, which is as the hegemon, as the dominant power, the middle kingdom, the center of the universe, as they call it. So those are the things that operate in my mind, and I think we ignore them at our peril, especially, Perry, and this is the thing that really does keep me up at night. There are, by some estimates, tens of thousands of People's Liberation Army soldiers, that is to say the Chinese Communist military, in our country, thanks to Joe Biden's open borders. And by the way, the sort of fast-tracking their arrival into this country by reducing the kind of investigation or interrogation that they were subjected to from something like 40 questions to just 5. I mean, it was y'all come, and they did. And what they are prepared to do to us from inside our wire, if you will, is a very, very worrying thing indeed.
How would you describe China's economy?
I think it's in difficulty. I think it, like its political system, is under acute stress, as is its population. The demographic crisis is almost hard to imagine. As I'm sure you know, by some estimates, the Chinese communists are, as a result of their so-called one-child policy towards reducing the size of their population, are now looking at reducing it perhaps by the end of the century to one that's smaller than ours, from 1.3 billion to, maybe 300 some million. I don't know that any nation, even in time of war, has sustained that kind of fundamental transformation, as Barack Obama might call it. And the consequences are hard to get your head around.
Well, let me swing your attention, what time we have left, Frank, over to the Middle East. And we've seen a dramatic change in the relationship between the United States and Israel since the election, and certainly the support that they've been looking for. You got Syria now in the mix with Turkey coming in. Hezbollah is damaged but not out. Hamas is damaged but not out. Houthis are damaged but not out. You think it's imminent that some kind of attack will occur on Iran and maybe even a regime change?
I'd add to your list the prospect of Egypt going to war with Israel. They've been pouring large numbers of forces into the Sinai, poised for that purpose, I believe. And Jordan could go at any time. To answer your question, Israel is in a truly endangered state. And the prospect that that might be compounded at any moment by the Iranian regime finally proclaiming that it has nuclear weapons, which it may well already have, and they just haven't acknowledged it, I don't know. But if not, it's any day now. This could give rise to a circumstance in which Israel feels absolutely compelled to attack. And if they do, I think we should help them, not boots on the ground, but support that attack. And that the attack should not just be aimed at the elusive, widely distributed, and deeply buried nuclear program of Iran. It should be aimed at weakening the regime so that the people of Iran at last can remove it, the scourge that it's represented to them and the danger that it poses to us as well as Israel.
So you would, excuse me, you would expect that Saudi Arabia probably will give a wink and a nod, so to speak, to go fly over their airspace to do something in Iran. They even could maybe come into the accord, I don't know. But I think to your other point, Frank, all of us have our brain on tilt that all along Egypt's been complicit because the tunnels originated in Egypt.
Absolutely right. You know, what's particularly worrying is despite evidence that that was so, I mean, we now have proof positive as a result of what Israel has discovered under the Rafah corridor as a result of the invasion. But for years, I think it's been pretty clear that the Egyptians were allowing stuff to be smuggled into Gaza, if not above ground, certainly under. And the trouble is, as we ignored that, we continued to pour, you know, basically our frontline weapons, more or less, including M1A1 tanks, which we now make in Egypt, to be integrated into the Egyptian military. So Israel now faces, including in some numbers in the Sinai, as I said, you know, very capable armaments, if not fully comparable to their own, certainly approaching it. And in the hands of a large number of Egyptians. How effectively they would fight remains to be seen, but we've been training them as well as arming them for years, and it's a very parlous situation, I think.
Wow.
And then you touched on it in passing there, the fact that Turkey is now in Syria with its proxies there and clearly interested in getting into Jordan, and I think actually coming to blows with Israel as part of its design to establish a new Neo-Ottoman empire, a new caliphate, if you will, throughout the Middle East and perhaps beyond. It's a very, very fraught moment indeed.
Doesn't that put pressure on the United States to reconsider its membership in NATO if they're going to allow Turkey to be a part of it?
The trouble is, there is no institutional mechanism for getting Turkey out. And I would be the first to say we should be doing that. It is not an ally. I mean, in the past, it has been an important one, but not under Erdogan by any means. I would not withdraw from NATO over that, but I would certainly be about figuring out how do you eject a nation that has gone from a cornerstone, certainly on that southeastern flank of the NATO alliance, into a menace to our members as well as Israel and many others besides.
You would think that that would be a breach of the statute alone of being a member of NATO, that they now have become an enemy of NATO.
You'd think so. And at the very minimum, you'd think it's not really a good idea to be continuing to treat them as a friend, like sharing intelligence with them and selling them arms and other steps that are empowering this regime, which, by the way, is also working with China
Yeah.
And to some extent with Russia as well. I mean, this is a very, very dubious business. I think that one of the things, if Donald Trump is intent on upping NATO's game, it has to be very seriously undertaken, and that is saying, look, if you are not with NATO, you cannot be part of the NATO alliance.
Good stuff. One last question. I want to go to your other role, heading up the Save the Persecuted Christians. We have heard some horrible news come out of Africa. Can you give us an update on those massacres?
Well, it's happening on a scale simply unimaginable, the persecution of Christians. Our friends at Open Doors USA estimate that, as you probably know, Perry, 385 million Christians are being brutally persecuted, heavily persecuted, not just, having bad days, can't get jobs and that. These are people who are being tortured, who are being raped, who are being imprisoned, who are being, in some cases, killed, in some cases, actually en masse. And that is happening in Nigeria in particular at the moment. There's an ongoing and very, very deadly jihad that has been mounted by the so-called Fulani and other elements, ISIS in the West Africa and Boko Haram and so on, all of which fall under that category that I called Sharia supremacists a moment ago, Perry. And that means that they are all intent on doing what Muhammad taught is Allah's will, which is to subdue, to compel submission by Christians, Jews, people of other faiths, and that means even killing them if it's deemed necessary. And in this case, they deem it necessary because the Muslims in Nigeria, especially these Fulani tribesmen, are intent on driving Christians out. Yeah. It's about half the population, about 100 million people, but they've been doing this kind of attack on them in their villages across Nigeria for years. And every week there are 20 or hundreds even of Christians that are being murdered, with their government doing precious little about it. And frankly, until recently, I think our government ignoring it, enabling it by saying, oh, no, this isn't about jihad. This is about farmers versus herdsmen. No. It's kind of like out of Oklahoma. Yeah. It's ridiculous. But this is just one symptom of what I consider to be really the spiritual warfare of our time. Yeah. And it's just happening at an unbelievable scale to Christians just because they follow our Lord Jesus Christ.
Wow. Thank you, Frank, for your time. It's been too long. Let's stay connected. Let me say to our viewers and listeners, securingamerica.tv is Frank's website where you can go and stay connected with him and enjoy what
May I give you two others, Perry?
Sure.
Just quickly?
Sure.
I've actually got a new institutional arrangement. I'm the president of the Institute for the American Future. And people can learn about what we do there at usfuture.org, usfuture.org, as well as at our Substack, which is securingamerica.substack.com.
Okay.
Thank you.
Oh, you're busy.
Yeah.
Good to see you, brothers. Let's stay connected. Thanks for your time.
Will do. Thank you, sir.
God bless.